Right, hello everyone. Very warm welcome to you all. I'm Heather Thorpe from juststyle.com. If you happen to not be very familiar with us, we're actually an online publisher of global news, analysis and intelligence for the apparel, textile and footwear industry. So thanks again for joining us for today's webinar, which is called How to Implement 3D as a Competitive Advantage, which is brought to you today by the global apparel experts Alvanon and leading provider of fashion 3D solutions, Browzwear. So first of all, presenting for Browzwear for today's event is their Chief Commercial Officer, Lena Lim. Lena is an expert in strategy, change process management, and business restructuring to enable digital transformation. She has over 20 years of experience managing teams in Asia, France, and the USA in the fashion industry, as well as a number of technology industries. A graduate of the INSEAD Business School in France, Lena also facilitates leadership, entrepreneurship, and social ethics workshops using visitor management simulation platform. She is committed to helping the craftsmen and women who create apparel to harness the power of digitalization. She's also a director of Ex-Border Community Service Limited and sits on the board of Wycliffe Global Alliance. Representing Alvanon, is the senior consultant, Tracy Rickett. Tracy has 20 years of apparel retail design and management experience. She held a variety of management positions at Target Corporation, including group manager, product design and development, and project manager for Missoni for Target Apparel and Home. Most recently, she has supervised a team of 15 chemical and textile engineers and fabric managers at Target in the development of raw materials for owned brand apparel. She also led an industry task force comprised of retailers with the goal of reducing textile waste in landfills. She is a passionate innovator committed to sustainability initiatives to reduce water, energy, and chemicals in retail and manufacturing. She also holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in fashion design from Otis College of Art and Design in Los Angeles, California. Also from Alvanon, we have the Director of Block and Grading, Christina Onusko. Christina has 25 years experience in design, pattern drafting, draping, garment construction and grading. She joined Alvanon in 2008, where she shares and applies her extensive expertise in technical design, manufacturing and product development. She helps clients establish standards and tools for optimizing garment fit and provides training to apparel brands on a global level. So now I'm passing you through to Lena, who will be able to begin today's presentation. So over to you, Lena.
So good afternoon. Thank you so much for your time and thank you for the introduction. What was really amazing is the overwhelming response to the webinar, and that kind of indicates to us that the industry is now embarking on its digital transformation journey, and it's exciting. For Browzwear, this is a 15 years wait, and it's suddenly happening right now. We're really excited. And today there are people on this call that I have deep respect for, as they have been on this journey for many years. And we at Browzwear term them visionaries and warriors of change. They are much more qualified to be on this panel speaking today. So I hope that I will do them justice as I share snippets of their journey, which they have taken together with Browzwear. So this is the agenda that I'll be covering today. And I know that our webinar speaks about how to, but I'm going to start off by saying that perhaps we should be looking at the why. And even as you answer the why, we do feel that it's necessary to communicate and build that alignment, that clarity within your organization, not only to your leadership, but importantly, also to your team and your peers. And from there on, I will be covering the case study with VF Jeanswear And then looking into kind of what should you be mapping out in your 3D solution. So where should we start? And this quote by Albert Einstein says it all. Changes starts by changing the way we think. Moving from a 2D environment that is one in 3D is almost a new language. So while it is quite tempting to just start off 3D by saying, so how can we use that in our process today? But maybe a better way to think about it is there a better way of doing garment creation? Is there a better way for us in our business? And we just facilitate that with the use of 3D. And that's kind of a different way of thinking. And one example that I give here is this, can we do pattern making in 3D? That's a different way of thinking versus going from 2D to visualizing in 3D. How would that happen? Should we do grading in 3D so that we can see across sizes for prints? And my partners here in Alvanon knows this very well as they deal with the bodies each and every day. They are very clued in to the importance of grading and blocks on the body itself. And they will be speaking a little bit more about this as well. And with new technology in print and manufacturing, can we connect design, sell to manufacturing? There's all this new thinking that are happening. And in the case study that I'll be sharing, I think Margarita from VF Jeanswear aptly puts this. It is not a great tool that creates a masterpiece, but a tool in the hands of a master that will create that masterpiece. And many of you today on this call are that masters, and that competitive advantage is that environment that you will be crafting for your organization. So what does this mean? It means, let's start with not fearing change. The truth is, kind of as this picture speaks of it, we will never have enough time if we continue to do the things we do today in the industry. At the start of many 3D initiatives, we often hear this from the users and teams. So all of you brave warriors of change out there, be prepared to hear this, that we would not have time, we don't have time, we're busy, but don't give up. Focus on what you have and not only what you don't have. Be prepared that you will have to experience a short period of overlapping between your 2D world and your 3D world, but it will not be for long. And you will see tangible results very soon, and that will give you confidence to just keep moving on. So what is your competitive advantage? I know it is not software. Different company applies 3D differently, and they start differently as well. Because how they see and plan as their competitive advantage is different from one another. That said, many companies spend a huge amount of time comparing software features, functions, and really not nearly as much time thinking about what really is that competitive advantage and what can 3D work to help you get there in the most productive manner. And most companies spend even less time communicating that decision to start and bringing that alignment to their organization teams internally so that they too can understand. Thus, very often when vision on how 3D can help us in our organization and help us build competitive advantage is unclear, it's kind of like this image that you see here. We know we are starting in 3D, but we're really not quite sure where it all ends, and it costs. It creates a lot of not just financial costs, but much more than that. It is that time, that emotional, and that relationship stress for our people. So there is that value in taking time to bring that clarity of the goals, strategy, process, experience of your people, and the tactical plans. It takes time, but it is not forever, and it will not take forever. And just that little bit of effort in bringing that clarity is actually time very well spent, because your digital transformation brings you huge value. So the question then is, if we are not here and asking why, then perhaps we should be, if we don't have the answer, then perhaps we should be asking the questions that we should be seeking. This is the view of our development cycle today. It is linear, it is silos, and it's rather dependent from one to the other. And therefore, when something does not work, it will just reiterate itself many, many times. So a large percentage of the 50 weeks do belong to the reiteration period of time, especially when your manufacturing partners or your development partners are not in your backyard. One of the common reasons for a company to want to start 3D, and we hear this often, is we want to start 3D because we want to be faster. But maybe the question should then be, why are we slower? And where is it coming from? And what are the areas that we really need to speed towards? Another common thing that we hear is we need to cut costs on samples and time on samples. And here as well, the question then perhaps should be, why and what do those different rounds of samples even exist today, and what exactly do they serve? And in this area, we should be asking ourselves also more intentionally the ideas and the verbal communications and what can work for us. And so when we do look at 3D, the first thing that we look at is trust. Trust is what drives the change, and that is so important for your organization, because without that trust, the organization itself, not trusting 3D, cannot build its foundation smoothly on this. So I seem to be missing some pieces of slides. I'm sorry, I'm just going to move back to this. So as we move from a linear to a collaborative process, we asked all the questions early on in our linear process. Then as we move towards a collaborative process, there are things that we should be asking ourselves. And as Browzwear have gone through like hundreds of implementations, typically those three critical elements will come up as we move to this collaborative chart that we see here. And the first thing to ask is that we should be asking is people. People need the confidence to know that they can do it. And for that reason, companies need to have the willingness to upskill their teams. Roles and responsibility will evolve, but I assure you that people of the craft and the new digital skills make a powerful impact of change for your organization as you go digital. The world's population is expected to grow to 7 billion. So you know what? Those 7 billion people need to be clothed. So we need all the people in our industry and much more with the digital skill sets. Next, your business model. It will change. Processes will change. You might move from a design, make, and hope to sell model that we have today to one that is sell and make. We start from design, we sell, and we make. That means your process will change. And the power of 3D will change also here the way you create your patterns, the way you design, because now you're designing on the body. It will change how you sell. It will change how you collaborate with your manufacturing partners. And all the possibilities will change in processes as you work together. And third, and most importantly, as I spoke earlier on, is all of this will not materialize without trust. You and your team first need to build the trust in that 3D garment. When it does not look right, it is perhaps a misalignment with the pattern and the body or the fabric. When it does look good, you need to trust that the physical sample coming back using this information generated from the 3D file will come in looking the same, because at the end of the day, we are selling clothes and not just digital. So without this basic level of trust in 3D and its technology and the virtual garment that you'll be seeing, it is near impossible to establish that workflow that will get you to your competitive advantage, unless, of course, you are prepared for many, many workarounds to support that otherwise. So without much ado, I'm just going to go ahead and speak about the VF Jeanswear case study. Some of you may have read this article on VF winning the Top Innovators Award for 2017. And here I'm going to take this and glean through 6 important steps that they took in this process. So the first thing that they did was really a clarity on their why. They knew very early on that it was better product, more efficient in terms of time and cost. Simple enough, right? So what happened once they have this simple goal and vision on what is their competitive advantage? The second step that they asked themselves was, well, what drives a better product? And in the article, you will read the answers to the questions that they asked themselves. As VF Jeanswear asked themselves this question, they identified the answer to be fit. It was clear to them that denim is the specialty product where fit and comfort plays a big part of a consumer's decision to buy. They were clear that if they can develop new fit better and faster for the many retailers and their consumers, there will be upside sales opportunity for them as well. So with that clarity in mind, they knew they had to evaluate 3D tools that will get them to a place where they could trust that fit and interpret that into the comfort level. They knew accuracy was important, so they started benchmarking the different technologies out there and what would it take to get them. But first thing first, denim works with fabrics and washes, so trusting that digital results of what was tested is extremely important. Not only what they did not only look at what they needed now, which was only fit and comfort, but it became clear to them that even in the fit of comfort at that point in time, and this was a few years ago, 3-4 years ago, they knew that many of the software and technology out there may not yet meet their next steps of moving them to an end-to-end digital creation and selling workflow. But as it met their needs today, they more importantly started benchmarking criteria on what are the partnerships that they can build and what level of partnerships that they expect from their technology partner. The next part of it, after the step 2, was to look at how do we then prepare our teams. Recruiting a full-time person with a deep years of experience in apparel making, from design to development, and also a person who is extremely progressive in technology use, was very important. VF Jeanswear leadership knew this person must have the experience of the craft in order to lead the project with credibility for the rest of their organizations, still in the 2D world, but moving there. And for this reason, Margarita was recruited to lead the project team under the leadership of product development. The next thing that they did was to look at the roles and responsibility and recognizing that that will change because of 3D. So Robert and Margarita started selecting initial team members for their pilots. They selected a small team initially of experienced technical designers with pattern knowledge, as well as bringing on new people who basically were either growing up or born into the digital computer world and were computer savvy. They looked at each of the role in the jeanswear product creation processes today, and instead of thinking about the titles that they held, they identified the skill sets that were needed in those new roles that they wanted to craft out, and then started training them towards that. For example, she was able to evolve the TD role beyond measurement and spec. But in 3D itself, to actually have what used to be a TD role do much more than that, to do the fit evaluation and then the fit correction at the same time, thus reducing the need to wait for a physical sample from Asia to check and tell. Now they were proactively making it happen and informing their sourcing and manufacturing teams on what to correct, and rather than waiting for it to happen. And this also resulted in much more consistency. You can read from the article, and also a white paper that was released last year, each TD can do 5 to 7 times more fit and fit corrections in the same amount of time that they used to. So with the success and the trust built, the teams now have the confidence to do much more. And today, product development includes pattern making in 3D, embroidery and designing in 3D, and so on and so on. And the role of a designer and technical designer are also different as the workflow becomes much more collaborative. And being a technologically progressive company, Jeanswear realized very early on that there were a lot of people coming in recruitment and asking the organization as well, what technology do you use? So as a result of all of this, they were actually able to hire better people as well. So interesting. That was not part of the criteria, but certainly something that they found coming from it. So secondly, they started looking on how they will build trust. They looked at their processes that was needed to support their workflow. They looked at the importance of a fabric library, which they built, testing fabrics with and without washes. Here, Jeanswear had a wealth of experience as far as material and fabric was concerned. So they were very clear on how fabric would work, and they only needed to digitize this. So in the course of it, they worked with us and Browzwear and taught us pretty much what was very important. And this really led to the enhanced simulation that Browzwear have, but also new testing methods for the different fabrics and different washes and so on. And this is why also the new fabric analyzer that Browzwear has. So interestingly, a new language was also developed as part of building that trust, a new language that was a visual way of thinking. So Jeanswear equated fit to comfort, as I mentioned earlier on. So they merged their physical fit process into the digital language as well. They took their fits, had their live fit model, wore it, and then kind of describe it in words that their teams were used to listening. And then they mapped those words to the digital side of the tension and the pressure map visuals that were shown within the Browzwear tool. So by doing this, they built that consistent and also a language that everyone within the organization could now understand, even if they had to look at it from a screen. Interesting process, and one that was most commendable as well. So the fifth thing that they kind of looked at was how do they change their process and workflow? Changes to process for them always undertook a firm methodology and approach. They took a stage of evaluation on why they wanted to do it, then take a pilot. And once the pilot was able to prove the results that they wanted, they then have the documentation and everything else to roll it out to the rest of the teams and the categories a lot faster. And because trust was built at an earlier stage, the ideas just flowed on how things could be more efficient, and that it was no longer a leadership top-down instruction, but the entire project and turned to be a program evolved with new ideas on how things can be done better at Jeanswear so that they can continue to have that better product at a faster and more efficient cost. One example that came was product team coming to them and saying, hey, since we do not have yardage of the fabric, but we do have a swatch, let's just go ahead and test that and then visualize this very quickly. They also looked at how they could do a lot of new 3D design variations in 3D. And in the article that was shared here, they shared an example of how they were able to do a rush request from a retailer client of theirs. And instead of waiting the typical 3 to 6 weeks to present a collection, they were able to do this in 5 days. And as a result of that, that drove them sales, and that further convinced the division and also the business that maybe this whole 3D is not just about creating a better product. There are some upsides into this, and it translated to more sales for them. So where are they going from there? And point number 6, where we look at the ideas of the flow of ideas, both internally and externally from Jeanswear, they started embarking on other areas beyond development. They started looking not only at what else, but who else. At this stage, it was no longer just the development team, but also their merchandising team, the design community, their Asia Development Center, their clients are now involved, and they very quickly recognized that a scaling up is now important. So they sought ways to rebuild that communication, manufacturing partners, yes, by which I mean that communication with manufacturing partners, meaning TechPack, and to help in all their initiatives to scale and to automate. And with the knowledge and experience that they gain, Jeanswear also started teaming up with other coalitions within the VF corporations and looking into how the rest of the corporations could also start working in 3D. And much more than that. And the last point here, giving back to the community, VF Jeanswear spent and invested a lot of time working with schools, colleges, and universities to adapt the curriculum to the changing times of apparel. They did not go into a school to tell them to have 3D for their students to learn 3D. They literally spent much time re-looking at the curriculum so that the students coming out could immediately understand what that apparel workflow is, but in a digital manner. And their dedication and attention to education is extraordinary and most commendable, because I believe that we will see them leading this effort and sharing this across the industry, and we will all benefit from that. So when we look at the VF success matrix in this case, it is about them making better decisions in 3D. They dedicated the resources and time to ensure that everyone within the organization understood what it could look like. They also organized workshops, kickoffs to help align internal teams, highlighted the key decisions that were taken that led them into meaningful actions against measurable results. The success that you see here does not in nowhere spell savings in samples or costs, because they were simply the byproduct of a more efficient workflow and collaborative team. But the success for them was really in the higher quality of product, a more efficient workflow, and consistency, communications, and a higher level of sales. So with all that I have shared with VF and all that we at Browzwear have also learned, it is now perhaps time for us to glean from their lessons learned. And if you are starting your own process into 3D right now and have your objectives clear, then you can start now perhaps thinking about what are the important things in your benchmarking criteria. This list is not exhaustive and is only an example from a handful of common things that our clients often look at. So given time constraint, I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but I'm going to look at a few of them that we believe is important. Similar to the physical environment, take time in your evaluation and put 3D to a comparison test with a physical garment. If you and your people cannot trust what it shows in 3D, then any further attempts to build a business model or a workflow might be futile. So for accuracy to happen, I think the questions to ask then is, can the software you choose allow you to work with different pattern making systems out there? Because you are dealing with many, many different manufacturers and they have different systems. Will this then be able to simulate with the right physics on the different bodies that you are likely to have? And by bodies, I mean the digital Alvaform by Alvanon, or maybe a scan body that you have, or something else that may come up as technology evolves. Ask yourself these questions and test this out. For some of you on the call today who are manufacturers, the manufacturing environment is also important. You must be able to demonstrate the accuracy to a physical sample, because there will come a day not too far away where the brand will design, sell, and you will make. And so you manufacturers out there, you are an important part of that change today. The next slide that we look at here is more than a design tool. When your competitive advantage starts being clear, it may mean that you may have to develop different product creation cycle. What do I mean by that? It could mean that you would have a design cycle for fast, something that you could go to market within 2 weeks. Then you could have something that is within your core, a development cycle that is probably 2 to 3 months. And something else for a new concept where you are leading some of the trends or trending much more quickly. And each of this could mean a different calendar cycle. And therefore, when you're looking at that design right into selling, the question then to ask is, will our designers be able to come into this, and how can we enable them to work and still keep that fit integrity and manage that different cycle that will still come? So as skills and technology evolve, it will allow you to have an expanded capacity of skill sets and knowledge, preparing your organization for change, not just for today, but also for tomorrow and whatever else digital world and the digital environment is going to hit us. The next part of it, which we found very important in our deployment, is also visualization control. As you benchmark, you will see that at some point, the entire organizations will be requiring you to have different visualization standards, if you like. What you see on the screen at a point of product creation and then moving on to a line review is different from how your merchandisers and selling teams may want to see. And then if you look at this image that I have right here, they are both digital, they are both 3D created, but there are different technology that's out there that involves you being able to put a body of a live fit model on it. So think, therefore, what that visualization control is needed and how and who will be creating this. But more importantly, look for the ability to automate the process going forward. Next, I'll be covering is the APIs and an open platform. And for many of you here, it's like, what is this for and why? The digital world will evolve and has thrown us a lot of things: artificial intelligence, augmented reality, machine learning. Your workflow have the potential to be much more efficient, much more faster. And many of our clients today are already building those pieces. Every day, new technology surfaces that will allow you to do more and make things happen faster. Therefore, with Browzwear, the open platform API stack was necessary because Browzwear feel that we need to put the control of steering your journey towards your competitive advantage into your hands. With the API stack, your development team internally, which is your IT technology team, digital transformation team, may have scripters and people who can help to automate that process a lot faster. What is on this slide here, integrating with the PLM, asset management, dynamic costings, are just few of the things that our clients are already working on and the use cases that is happening already. 3D is one technology that can be applied to several work streams, allowing you to have a complete end-to-end workflow and one that will grow with you as your business evolves. So innovation is here with 3D. We believe that with the clarity of your objectives, the alignment of your people as you upskill them, and finally matching that to a technology solution and partnership will only create success for you. So that ends my presentation. Thank you very much for listening to me. And now I will hand this time off to Alvanon's Tracy and Christina.
That's been very enlightening, I have to say. I hope everybody enjoyed it. It was really insightful. So now Lena's told you a little bit about what 3D can do to help improve your business processes. It'd be nice now to introduce you to Tracy and Christina from Alvanon, who can then talk you through what to expect during your 3D journey. So over to you, Tracy and Christina.
Thank you so much, Heather and Lena. And thank you to Just Style for having us. We're very excited to be able to talk about an exciting topic in the apparel industry. So you've decided to move forward with 3D, and the big question is, now what? There are many considerations when you're talking about apparel 3D. If the goal of 3D If the goal is 3D proficiency, brands and honestly vendors find themselves in different places in their 3D journey. And this is partially because technology is evolving and also the workforce is evolving. So some brands find themselves at the very beginning, just getting started in 3D and developing a strategy. Some brands are at the 3D software selection phase and very nervous about which software to choose. A lot of brands are committed to 3D, but still working on 3D proficiency. And unfortunately, some brands who've been in 3D for quite some time find themselves derailed after getting into it and are in the process of kind of reworking what 3D means to them. We liken 3D and apparel kind of to a vortex at this point in time. There's a lot of press coverage on 3D. Brands are attending conferences trying to get any tidbit they can on what's going on in 3D, how people are using it, and what's really working. It leaves people asking themselves, do we have realistic expectations for what it will actually take? Where do we start? What about fabric considerations? Do we need specialized people or additional skills with our existing workforce? How do we choose the right software? Which avatar do we use? Are there common practices and protocols that people have already developed for 3D? And what do my cross-functional partners need to learn? It amounts to a lot of noise and can be very confusing.
Hi, everyone. So let's talk a little bit about breaking down the noise and what that means. And what Tracy and I are going to talk about a little bit as we go through some slides are the really important things. You know, when you're talking about avoiding costly mistakes, you need to be sure that you understand the technology and you give some consideration to taking the time to thoroughly research what is available and what all of the capabilities are. When you think about your organizational considerations, you want to be sure that you have the right people in place. So you want to look at what are your current resources and where do you need to supplement with people in skill set? How much training will then be needed in order to do that? And lastly, of course, you do want to take the time to be very planful in approaching how you will implement 3D into your current processes and what that looks like. We're going to talk a little bit more about these key areas in the following slides. The first thing that we want to keep in mind is that really 3D prototyping isn't new. It may be new to us, but the reality is it's been around in the automotive industry and even other more mechanical engineering fields. And the thing about that is whenever you talk about auto industry, mechanical engineering fields, you're talking about solid objects. And, you know, they may be measuring down to, you know, a 64th of an inch, but it's a solid object. When you start talking about the apparel industry, you're talking about adding variables, especially fabric drape, and that's so important in understanding fit. So that's a variable in the apparel industry that makes it a little more complicated. Some brands have been working in 3D for 7 to 8 years and are finding some successes in that. Brands have been exploring varying capacities and use, such as visual presentation, colorways, patterns, logo placement, some for designing, certainly pre-sampling, as we talked, Lena talked about a little bit, to save on that sampling cost, and visual imaging, whether it be for online product or for internal line reviews. What is happening as we're seeing brands continually delve into really embracing 3D, the industry is coming up with best methods, and they're kind of starting to take shape. You know, you need to figure out, I shouldn't say you need to figure out, we are figuring out slowly what the best methods are to yield the most effective and efficient result. You know, for example, how to set standards for multiple users so that you're yielding a consistent, repeatable fit from every aspect. So choosing the right software, questions that you want to start to ask yourself. And the biggest thing is you want to ask what you are trying to accomplish with 3D. Are you looking at using it for visual presentation only, for really implementing it into the product development cycle for both design and fit? Do you have a good understanding of what will take to implement 3D into your organization? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that particular aspect with some details in the slide coming up. Now, with that, you want to be sure to investigate the 3D technology options and capabilities. Not only do you want to know the capabilities of the software, but you also want to be sure to consider all of the setup aspects. You know, for example, is it going to require hardware upgrades? Will you want to link to other systems, and what will it take to do that? So you really need to be clear on which software is the right fit for what you are trying to accomplish. Homework is really, really important. You know, when you're trying to find out which software you want, you may end up finding out that one software isn't necessarily capable for everything that you need to achieve. And so you want to be sure that you have an understanding of everything that is available. You may need more than one to achieve your goals.
So when we talk about avoiding costly mistakes, it's important to get the full scope of what it really takes to implement 3D successfully. And we recommend going to multiple sources, getting an independent expert opinion when you're developing your strategy before you find yourself in it and sort of trying to figure it out as you go. So in addition to choosing a software, there are many other considerations when we're talking about implementing 3D successfully. We'll break down some of those in a moment. And just remember, just as your organization's current process is unique, how to best use 3D will likely be unique to your organization as well.
3D does work best when your avatar standard matches your brand fit standard. And so it's important when you consider that not only are you thinking about your brand fit standard, but also if you're using a fit form, your brand fit form. And that's mostly to ensure, especially that whoever is using 3D, be it at one of your suppliers or at your brand office, everyone is looking at the same thing with consistency. As the needs become more evident, avatar providers are definitely responding and continue to evolve the 3D avatar. And it may include the key points that are included in that evolution are different poses for the avatar. You know, we have heard that some brands like using the fit form, and at the same time, you know, we still need to have poses and certainly animation. And looking at a fit model look to the avatar versus a fit form look to the avatar. The point is that providers are listening, and because brands are looking for a more effective suite of tools, then that avatar is continually evolving to try to meet those needs.
So when we're talking about organizational considerations, the apparel industry is a legacy industry with very deep legacy processes. We have to remember that it started out with seamstresses and couture tailors, and it's still a very hands-on, labor-intensive industry. But now we find ourselves in an environment of rapid change. 3D requires new skills and new ways of thinking. It's really about doing the same thing. After all, we're still making clothing, but doing it in a new way. 3D requires an evolved skill set. For our technical design listeners, it's much like when we moved from paper patterns into CAD systems. It was a big change for that part of our industry. And let's be honest with ourselves, some of our developing nation partners, where a lot of us are manufacturing, have yet to make that leap. If you think about your design partners and ask yourself, how ready are they to change from flat sketches to showing ideas on a 3D avatar? This is a big hurdle and a big change for them. It really requires a mindset shift. people really begin to make decisions differently, as Lena alluded to earlier, using different tools than what they're used to. And this can be really invigorating for some people and a little bit scary for other people.
So getting there, transcending the hurdles, kind of in a bit of a summary here. Researching the options, really take the time to understand the available software capabilities. Give the time needed to know your objectives for 3D in your own brand, both short-term and keeping a long-term vision. And adapting. So important here. Changing processes and adopting new approaches can be difficult, as Tracy just mentioned, more for some than others. But 3D is definitely the wave of the future with vast possibilities, and the industry is evolving, and it's important to stay open to change and adapting how we think and how we do things. It's important along the way that you take partners to help as you embark on your journey and throughout, so that you can have resources with experience to help with questions and understand what it will take within your organization to be successful. So you need to be sure that you're understanding the right technology to achieve your goals, the right people with the right skill sets in place, and the right processes for your brand to be successful.
So in summary, we're really talking about the future of 3D. So no matter where you are in your 3D journey, these are all important topics for your organization to work through as you're considering implementation. And we just want you to remember that Alvanon is your trusted partner in 3D. You know, we're a global company, and we're researching and talking with both US and European brands, our vendor partners, and mills on what the current needs in the industry really are in 3D, and working on practical solutions to help the industry move forward. This is really something we believe in. We believe it's the wave of the future, and really important to start on that journey or continue on it as we move forward as an industry. And with that, I will turn it back over to Heather to lead us through some Q&A.
Hi, well, thank you very much. Thanks to all of you, actually, Lena, Tracy, and Christina, for sharing your experiences. We have lots of questions coming in, so it's great. Do keep them coming. They're really good questions too. So I'll get stuck in. First of all, this one is directed at Browzwear. So Lena, if you're there.
Yes.
What are some examples of good places to start with 3D?
So when you look at 3D, the one thing to focus on is it can start from anywhere, but start from what is the thing that is causing most pain for you. I don't know the organization that is asking this, but if an organization is in knits or woven and they have some basic stuff that drives 50% of their business, and then are those pain points, say for example, print, graphics, and so forth. And if it is, then those are generally easy place to start and a quick way to work. If the organization's pain point is really in development of fit, and fit is important, then that's also a good area to start. Rather than asking kind of like where do we start, it's so much more to just think of start small, pick 1 or 2 categories, pilot that through for 3 or 4 objectives that you want to hit, bring the teams that are necessary together, and then evolve from there. So I hope that helps to answer that.
Thanks. Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Lena. We'll try one for Alvanon this time. So what successes have brands seen using 3D?
I'll start, Chris.
Okay.
I would say probably the biggest ones, most common maybe, are print and pattern multiples, because it's low-hanging fruit. And in addition to what Lena mentioned, I think it's really important to consider starting with low-hanging fruit and developing some kind of quick wins and some, as Lena talked about earlier, trust within the organization that 3D works. So print and pattern multiples, color runs, it's not necessary in this day and age to receive samples in every single color. They can often be recolored digitally using those same assets in some cases. And then just rapid prototyping, lots of innovation at the early stages of product development. We're all worried about, multiple samples and trying to cut down on the number of samples that we ask for physically, both from a sustainability standpoint as well as just a, time and energy standpoint. So rapid 3D allows you rapid prototyping where you can see it visually, make some decisions, keep moving forward before you've even seen a physical sample.
Great, thanks for that, Tracy. While you're on, actually, I'll ask you this question too. What are the challenges with bringing vendors and factories onto the 3D bandwagon, and how can we convince them of the value of partnership in 3D? That's a really good question, actually.
I'm not sure, Heather, if that was for Browzwear or for us.
It was, well, I was going to, Tracy, I was going to get you to answer that one as you were mid.
Oh, I was happy to. I have lots of ideas on this one. It's interesting from our conversations with brands who are working with vendors and then also vendors themselves. I actually don't see this as much of a hurdle as brands believe it might be. Vendors they've been asked by brands to purchase software, in some cases multiple different softwares. And because of that brand partnership, we really haven't seen a lot of resistance to vendors purchasing the software and upskilling their workforce to learn how to use it. They see the benefit of reducing sampling. They see, it really affects them. When you talk about speed, if we can reduce number of samples and the speed of which a sample can be created and the decision made, they really benefit. So I haven't seen vendor onboarding as a real hurdle in 3D. They've been pretty willing partners.
Excellent. Lena, do you have anything you want to add to that one?
I agree. If we look at the adoption of 3D, it was the factories that have been in this since 2007, because for them, the value of being able to craft a better product for their client in order to have the order was so much more real and tangible. So getting them on board is not generally an issue at all. I think the issue in vendor onboarding is much more laying down the expectations of why and what you want them to do. Today, there are many different models between a brand retailer and their vendors. Whether the vendor is a pure CMT, cut, make, trim, or whether the vendor is a development partner, that will entail you to manage that expectation differently. One example, if you are expecting them to create a virtual prototype for you, you don't just want them to give you a pretty looking face. You need to set that expectation that this is a prototype. If I'm approving on this, you have to make sure that the physical garment comes in looking exactly like it. And if you want them to go further and says that whatever 3D that you've developed for me, please make sure that it is good enough for us to be doing some level of selling, then the quality standards of it needs to be raised. So it's more the onboarding process of managing that expectation and laying down the ground rules for the factory, pretty much like you would do in a physical garment of giving them a quality standard. Those kind of things needs to be adhered to as well.
That's great, thank you. I've got a question for Chris, actually. Tell me, when will we be able to generate a spec sheet in 2D pattern from the 3D avatar?
Oh gosh, that's a bit of a difficult question for me to answer because that may be more of a software capability issue. I think if I'm understanding it correctly, we may be saying to, if I create the garment in the 3D and then take the measurements and the specs directly from that and bring it into the pattern. And that may vary with different software providers. So that is definitely something that I would research.
Okay. I mean, Lena, do you have anything that you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I think bodies and measurements is only one point. I think most technology out there allows you in some ways to, put in body measurements anyway. But importantly is to look at the shaping of the body. And Browzwear do believe, I think with the way that the industry is working on fit and gearing itself to be more attuned to consumer, we are seeing alpha forms, and we are seeing the need for body scans and many other of those things coming into play as well. Inherently, the software must be able to incorporate a more variety of technology where bodies are concerned.
Yes. Okay, lovely. Thanks for that, Lena. Okay, one for Alvanon. This sort of carries on quite nicely, actually. Can one avatar be used for a variety of 3D softwares?
Chris, did you want to take it?
Yeah, I was going to say, yes, absolutely, it can. We work with all the different software companies in creating our Alvaform avatars, and they are usable in different softwares. Yes.
Excellent. That's great. Thanks for that. Okay, Browzwear, one for you, Lena. One of the benchmarks you listed was fabric libraries. How do you build one?
So fabric libraries is coming with the physics that is necessary. Browzwear offers a standard library, but the client also has the option of buying a fabric analyzer. So think of it like a little box, probably the same size as your MacBook Pro, a little bit higher than that, obviously thicker, and then putting the fabrics and testing it automatically, and then feeding that information in. So those apparatus or the equipments are there for you to test the physics as well as to scan the images of this, so you will know how to mirror the exact actual fabric swatch as well.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you.
Heather, do you mind if I add something to that?
Of course. Yes. Carry on, Tracy.
I think this is a really excellent question. And this, the same as what Chris alluded to earlier, differs by software. So certain softwares will provide you with a standard library, may or may not match your full fabric library that you are wishing to simulate in 3D. And then some softwares don't offer a fabric library, and it's all by testing, whether you do it yourself or you have an outside company do it. So it's one of those points of research, and a really important one that people need to do their homework and really understand what comes with the software, how do I use it, how complete is it for what I need. So a lot of research should be devoted to understanding the capabilities.
And how accurate.
Yes, and how accurate.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Alvanon, tell me, what's next in 3D?
Oh, goodness. As fabric simulation, we were just talking about, evolves, we see it being used more and more for fit purposes. I think brands are dabbling in that now, but sometimes find that the fabric doesn't react or drape the same way, or fit issues that they see on a physical sample they don't necessarily see on their virtual sample, again depending on the software. So I think as that evolves, you'll see more and more brands begin to use it for fit approval, and that will exponentially speed up the calendar. Lena talked about size run verification. I think it will be used for that in the future. And then future, I think we could see a day when it's used for virtual reality, when you're standing in your living room trying on your, potential purchase using a pair of glasses. So I think we're a little ways away from that, but it's fun to kind of dream about when that might be a reality.
Definitely. But then you can't hide what you've bought from your husband if you do that. That's the problem.
You only have one pair of glasses, Heather.
Oh, well, that's not so bad. Okay.
He doesn't know if you're watching a movie or you're trying on outfits.
I want to do both. Okay, so here's a question for both of you, or all of you. Can you share best-in-class usage for designers versus tech design?
Lena, do you want to take that one first?
Certainly. And And I alluded to that in my presentation earlier on. It's a very good question, because designers coming into 3D has always been seen as something that is very difficult. But that is not the case. When we speak to designers all around the world, the ability for them to move into 3D, visualize their design so that they can communicate that design intent is exciting for them. It opens up a whole new creativity realm for them. It allows people not to misinterpret their design, and they're excited by that. And also, today, a lot of designers are also doing some level of work that they should not be doing. So, for example, things like, verifying tag tags and then so on and so on. Just the ability to know that in this 3D file will hold all the information that I can then go into manufacturing opens up this new realm of time to do research, time to be inspired, to be creative. And for us at Browzwear, we feel that this is the time to connect with many of the designers out there to understand what they would like to be doing and how they will be using the tool. I spoke to a designer actually this week in Boston. It was very interesting, and she said that, in the previous time when she was in school, she learned creativity, but also apparel making. And when she put herself this last week into training with us, all of a sudden, everything came back to her. The whole idea of being able to work in 3D, drape, see, was exactly how apparel making was taught. And this now done on a computer very quickly just brought so much excitement and inspired her to just say that I want to do so much more. I want to be doing design and creating that. And the earlier question that somebody asked on what's the next step, and I alluded to this in my presentation. Today, we are in I design, I make, and I hope to sell. But the truth of the matter is there are many e-commerce and digital people out there like Amazon who are challenging that realm and saying, no, I want to have our designers design, connect that directly to a consumer where they will be excited to say yes, nay. And then from there, we being inspired to do much more things and then going direct to manufacturing all seamlessly. That possibility, and also to what Tracy spoke about, being able to use VR to dress a garment to fit on my body, all of these are exciting for a designer anywhere, and we have not seen a huge resistance. We have seen perhaps a hesitation more on how will this work in our processes, but in general, I think they all understand that it's creativity and they're excited by it.
That's great. Thanks for that, Lena. That's really helpful. So can you tell us how much time the organisation needs to implement 3D, assuming 2D CAD is already used? I don't know who wants to take this one first, really. Who would this?
I think the best answer is probably it varies greatly. It depends on sort of what resources you already have in place and the willingness of your team to sort of change and evolve in that environment. And just the physical resources of, are you going to have a separate team, or are you going to have your existing team upskilled for them to take on, in addition to their regular workload, the extra activities that it takes for 3D. So depending on how you develop that strategy and choose to use those resources, the time that it takes can vary greatly, I think.
That's great. Thanks, Tracy. Lena, do you have anything you would like to add to that one?
Yes. I would just like to say that start small. There is always the possibility of starting in a category, finishing them up within 3 to 6 months, seeing how this works for your organization. And in the meantime, during this pilot phase, continue to document and so forth, because the next pilot will be less time. We have seen organizations, that have moved so fast, taking that first initial product, verifying, trusting that within 3 months, bringing it back and then planning it, that in the space of a year, being able to go completely digital. Obviously, the size of the company does matter, but all of these are pockets that can happen very, very quickly, or it can take also a longer time if you want to get to the perfect future state and you want to have all the pieces. But our recommendation is, with technology changing so fast today, dig in, plan well, start small, and scale is the approach that we would suggest.
That's great advice. Thanks, Lena. Right, I think we're just about ready for the last question of the day. It's been a great presentation, and we've had so many people joining in and sending us questions. It's been great, so thank you all. Any of the ones we haven't had a chance to answer, we'll pass, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we'll pass through to the speakers and they'll be able to get back to you at a later date. But the final question is, what's the number one mistake brands make with 3D? So maybe Tracy, you can kick off with this one for me.
That's an excellent question. I would say from the research that we've done and extensively talking with brands who have done this, I think jumping in without getting the full scope of what it's really going to take. And that can partially be because it's so exciting. And when you see the presentation by the 3D providers, who wouldn't want to jump in with both feet and get started? And I think, brands get so excited about the benefits and how they can use it that, the time and the energy that it takes to really do that homework and understand what it's really going to take. Sometimes they don't take that amount of time before kind of jumping in, especially to a software choice. And I also think that because this is an evolving technology, and we all have to remind ourselves of this. We have lots of wishes for what it will do, and it will do that in the future. But just understanding that we are where we are now, and getting into it, like Lena said, starting small is a great idea, so that you are beginning to understand what it takes, and then you're moving along with the industry as the industry is evolving, and as every software iteration comes out and it's that much better, you're only having to learn that incremental bit better, rather than starting from scratch with learning everything about 3D. So I think my advice would be to start small and to start most importantly.
That's great. Thanks, Tracy. Lena, Chris, do either of you have anything you want to add to that?
Yes, the costliest mistake that I feel that one can make is by going in there and telling and announcing to the team that we are starting 3D because we want to save on samples. So you guys are not going to get samples anymore. I think that is perhaps the one resistance and one mistake, because it just brings up so much more resistance. So I alluded to that in my presentation, that sample savings is a byproduct, but going in there and sending tremors and shivers throughout the organization that you're not going to get a sample because we are starting 3D is not a great idea. So, and in addition to that, everything else that we've talked about, there is a cost to confusion when things are not clear, and there is great value to clarity.
That's great. Thanks, Lena. Chris, did you want to add anything before we finish up today?
No, I think that Tracy and Lena have both really covered it. I think certainly jumping in and being very knowledgeable so that you have an understanding of the journey in front of you and where you'll start and choose to start and then evolve through. I think that's most important.
Definitely, it's certainly good advice. Well, thank you all so much for taking part in this webinar today, and thanks everybody who's joined us and has listened to us for this hour and 10, which we've managed to fill quite quickly. So just to say, we really hope you've enjoyed learning about 3D from the two leading companies offering the best solutions. Just a quick heads up, Alvanon will be tackling another key topic next month, which is plus size. So Alvanon's experts will be hosting a webinar specifically dedicated to success in the plus size market. So watch out on Just Style for some information with regards to when you can sign up for that, the date and the time, etc. That's all coming very soon. So thank you all again, and thank you to our speakers, Tracy and Lena and Christina, for your hard work and or for your insightful information that you've shared today. And hopefully we look forward to hearing from Alvanon again next month.